Okay, so welcome to everybody to my advanced tarot class. What I'm going to talk about in this class is I'm going to teach you guys spreads that I've been using for a number of years that I have found to be very, very effective spreads and good alternatives to the standard spread that most people are taught, which is the Rider-Waite, or not the Rider-Waite, the Celtic Cross spread. So how many of you, and by the way, if you have any question during the meeting, probably the best thing to do is to go to the chat box on the bottom and post the question on the chat. Now, if you don't want to send it to the whole group, you can send the question to me privately and I can still see the question, or you can send it to the whole group so everybody can, chime in if you like. And I'll get to the questions as soon as I can. Okay, so how many of you actually work with the Celtic Cross on a regular basis?
I do.
Yeah, myself.
Okay.
I don't.
All right, so several of you. Okay, good. And I love the Celtic Cross because it's a very, very powerful spread. But I think one of the things that I noticed that was most difficult, or where it was most lacking is probably a better way to say it, is somebody had a very specific question. Like, am I going to meet the man of my dreams? Which happens to be the question that I did the reading on tonight, interestingly enough, for someone that whose name will remain unmentioned to protect the guilty. I mean, to protect the innocent. So anyway, so I just find that Celtic Cross is good, but if you have a very specific question, I think sometimes it's hard to deal with that. So I learned this spread, and I was trying to think about whether or not I learned it from my Native American teacher. I might have learned it from Mary Greer. It might actually be in her book, but it's one I've used a lot, and I've made some variations to it a little bit, and I found it to be very useful. So what I'm going to do right now. All right, so this is the configuration. When I lay out the cards, this is what it looks like. And the sequence that I lay them out is the very first card goes here, and then I put a second one here, a third one, fourth one. Then I do the next diagonal, 5, 6, 7, then 8, 9, 10, and then 11. Now, what these individual positions mean, the first one, the first position number 1, is the significator of the question itself, and it sort of gives you some insight. Then then the second and the third card is what I call subconscious or personal influences. Now, there's a little bit of a similarity between positions 2 and 3, which are sort of, you look at them together as both being contributions to the reading, as in some content in their subconscious or their own personal influences. And then there's also 5, 6, and 8 are also influences, and they're different. So I want to talk about the distinction between them. I think of 5, 6, and 8 as environmental factors. So that means things that are influencing the question might be external. Okay. Then this position here, number 4, is one of the more interesting positions in the spread, and it's one of the more powerful places in the reading. Sort of like when you're doing the Celtic Cross, and one of my favorite spots is the position that we call hope and fear. The one just before the outcome card. That position is often very, very revealing when you're doing a reading. And the 4 position, I think, is also very, very similar. So what does a bridge mean? Well, usually when somebody's asking a question, they have something that they're some sort of state of consciousness they're in, or some sort of situation they're in. And what they want is something to be different. So to get to the difference that they want, like the different outcome, like for instance, to find the man of her dreams, let's say, there's something that's required of them, something that they have to do that would really help them to get where they want to go. You know, you guys all know this, that when you read, rarely does the Tarot spell it out for you as if it's all happily ever after. There's usually somewhere within the course of the reading, there's something that indicates the person's issue or the person's challenge. And the whole point of getting a reading is to empower people. And the way that people get empowered is by looking at the limited thought they have, getting what they want or achieving what they want. So the bridge card is usually an indication of what they need to do, the step that they need to take. Now, this position, number 7, this is the other powerhouse position. And if the bridge is sort of like, how does one get from one state of mind to another, the number 7 is the action that the person has to take. What do they specifically need to do? What is called for them to step forward to accomplish what they want? Okay. Now, 9 and 10 are what we call near future possibilities. Now, these are cards that indicate, like, if nothing changes, if everything sort of stays the same and the person does nothing, this is what is the future is going to present to them. This could be challenges that show up in the near future that relate to this issue, or possibilities. Sort of like the difference between the top of the cross and the top of the column in the Celtic cross. You have outcome and you have possible outcome, or near or future. All right, so then the final card is the outcome card, and that is sort of the, well, what an outcome is. It's like what the reading is, what is being indicated by Spirit of how things are likely to go. Now, sometimes when you're doing a specific question, it really comes down to a yes/no kind of thing. Yes, I'll get the job. No, I won't. And there's a thing that I do a lot, and I want to teach you guys this as well, and that's called a 5-card yes or no specific question. And so basically what you do is you lay out 5 cards, left to right is usually what I do. And the way this works is, it's a 5-card yes or no. 3 or more of the cards being upright would indicate that the answer to the question is yes. 3 or more reverse, the answer is no, unless you're working with my deck, in which there's another option, which I'll talk about in a minute or two, for those of you who have my deck. No, I guess what we'll do is I'm going to show you now the spread that I did for the person on are they going to meet the man of their dreams. The first card that came out, the significator or the question, is the Temperance card reversed. All right. So then the next card that came out, and the next 2 cards actually, the undercurrents, is the Hermit card reversed in the Wheel of Fortune. So I know the way I read this is, the Temperance card is the question itself. What I thought of when I saw that in that position is that the person really, they really run hot and cold on this issue. There's a part of them that wants to be in a relationship and wants to have someone significant in their lives. But there's also a part of that person that's either afraid of relationship or doesn't want to do the work to build a relationship, or in some way thinks, oh, I'm fine without it. I don't really need it. So I see the Temperance card reversed as being sort of an indication of running sort of hot and cold and not really doing the work that needs to happen. So, like I said, so then the undercurrents, the influences. Well, the Hermit card reversed, the way I see that is that the person isn't really looking at themselves. When a hermit goes into the desert, they go into the desert to seek out the truth. That's the whole idea about the lamp, trying to shed light on a situation. But the other thing that goes on when one goes into the desert is one has desert experiences. And the example of that would be, of course, what happened to Moses and what happened to Jesus. Moses goes into the desert and he is shepherding the goats around, and he comes across this burning bush, which starts talking to him and says basically, you have to rise above your current situation and lead the people out of Egypt. So in a sense, to me, that's a metaphor for the higher self calling out the person to rise above their current circumstances. And we all have hermit moments where we feel that we're being called to do something that we may not feel that we're ready to do. Some sort of challenge that may feel greater than we think we're ready to master or deal with. Now, the other kind of experience is the one that happens to Jesus. And Jesus goes out in the desert, and the story goes that Satan comes and starts talking to him. And Satan says, you should need to give up on this Messiah thing and just sort of become my buddy and everything will be fine. Which is, if you really look at that carefully, what that really amounts to is like a little inner voice that says, oh, just give up. Why try to overcome your issue, or why try to deal with your issue? Just give up and get on with your life and sort of accept it. So the idea is that when you go out in the desert, your higher self and your lower self, your unconscious, which is, I think, the devil voice, is going to say, give up, don't do it. While your higher self says, you can rise above it. And we all sort of struggle with that issue of, are we going to continue to work on our particular life, our particular evolutionary challenges? Are we going to work on our particular road, take the next step on our road to enlightenment? Are we going to do the work that we need to do? So when the Hermit card is reversed, what I think that indicates is that the person isn't really isolating or doing that introspection and hearing either of the voices. They're not really thinking about their part in the situation. They're just sort of looking at and saying, am I going to meet the man of my dreams? As if it all depends on something external. However, you look at the next card, the Wheel of Fortune. Now, what I think that is saying is that the person is in a good place for things to work out the way they want. That the fortune is turning in their favor, or time is in their favor. So after maybe several failed relationships or difficult relationships, the Wheel of Time or the Wheel of Fate might be saying, hey, it's time for you to get a break, for something different to happen. So then you got the three cards that are like the environmental influences. Ace of Pentacles reversed. I think that's saying that from the person's perspective, there isn't any opportunity. There isn't anybody in her world that actually is, from her perspective, is someone that might actually be a potential candidate for a relationship. The Queen of Cups, on the other side of the Empress, Queen of Cups, I think it is an indication that when she actually starts to think about the idea of relationship, there's a lot of negative emotions that come up that are still not dealt with, which goes back to that thing about the Temperance card of running real hot and cold and being unresolved on this issue. And then the Empress reverse might say something along the lines of either she's not being creative or she's not really comfortable in her goddess energy, which is the divine feminine, the being fully in her womanhood, because I think you have to be in that place in order to you have to be in that receptive mode, that sort of flirtatious, playful courtship mode, if you're actually going to build a relationship or have a relationship. So when she says, am I going to meet the man of my dreams, there's sort of an implication that she's not thinking about what she has to do to make that happen. It all sounds like it's something external. Now, the bridge, the Page of Cups reversed. Now, that's a very interesting card to have in that position, because what's the bridge? How does she begin to move out of this place where she's at with relationship and move into a place where something actually might actually occur? Well, I think she needs to stop being so emotionally self-indulgent. She needs to stop, just sort of being in a reverie of emotional states, and actually get active, or get participatory in the process. Recognize that it's not just something that's going to happen to her; it's something she needs to do. And then the what's the action that's called for? Well, this is a very interesting card to have in that position. Let me take a minute to explain this card. If the Strength card represents the soul, represents the ego. It represents a part of ourselves that is, our strengths, our weaknesses, our good parts, our bad parts. It's what makes us up, and, defines our individuality. Somewhere underneath the ego, there's a part of ourselves that we call the soul. Now, forgetting about whether or not, thinking of the soul in a religious context, but thinking of it more in the context of the part of ourselves that's eternal, the part of ourselves that's untouched by the trauma of life, or the difficulties of life. That's what this card represents. It's like, if you look at it closely, there's like this egg, and the egg looks like it's made out of diamond. And the idea is a diamond is like it's impervious to any other substance. It's the hardest substance known to man. And the idea is the soul is impervious to all the ups and downs of the ego, or what the ego is afraid of, or what the ego desires. The soul is a part of ourselves that knows that we are here to evolve. It's the part of ourselves that motivates us even when we don't personally want to evolve. Our egos don't necessarily want to evolve. But the soul is like that part within us that sort of pushes us forward in life. So the position here is what's the actions called for? And I think what this card is saying is that she needs to recognize that relationships are evolutionary drivers. Now, it doesn't have to be just a romantic relationship that's an evolutionary driver. It's any kind of relationship that we are in is an evolutionary driver, because of the way things work or they don't work. We become aware of the limitations within ourselves, that, maybe we need to evolve, we need to become more mature, we need to pay better attention. We are all, bozos on the bus, or participants on the journey of life, or we're all fools, if you will, if you want to go back to the tarot was sometimes called the fool's journey, as he moves from the magician all the way through the world card. So this is the part of ourselves that it's saying that I think the bridge here is to say to her that you have to understand that relationships is, again, it's an evolutionary driver, and you have to think about, what do I need to do? What is my part? If the way the question is asked, it sounds as if there's a thought that it's just something that happens. And yes, there's a certain amount of luck that goes on in any relationship situation, but one has to consciously participate in the process. And I think that's what the bridge is saying, is that she needs to participate in the process. So now the near future cards. Now this is really fascinating. The Ace of Swords says to me that the universe is not going to give her clarity about what this situation is going to do. It's not going to reveal to her, okay, well, you go to the Albertsons and go to the produce section and look for the guy looking at grapefruits. That's the man of your dreams. It's not going to be something like that. She's not going to see the resolution to her desire or whatever. But then the other card that shows up here, this is my last card in my tarot deck, and it's the Infinity card, or the Universe card. And the message with this is really very simple. Beyond the world is the universe. And the universe is that there's always more to learn. There's always more to discover. There's always infinite possibilities in an infinite universe. And the reason, or the reason this card shows up in this position, I think, is the universe is saying, or spirit is saying to her, anything's possible. Even though, if I look at all these cards up to this point, my sense of it is she's not really doing anything. She's just sort of waiting for something to happen. So what is the outcome card? The outcome card is the Page of Swords reversed. Well, the way I see that is I think that card is indicating that she's not going to be able to stand apart and just sort of look at this question much longer. That somehow, some way, something is going to happen. And you'll see what I mean when we go to the next part of this reading, which is the 5-card yes or no. So, as I said before, what you do is basically lay out 5 cards. I go left to right. It's up to you how you want to do that. I don't think it matters particularly. And the 5 cards that she got, as far as, and by the way, Elizabeth, I will send you a copy of this recording.
Oh, thank you.
You don't have to, and I'll also send you guys a copy of the spread, like as an attachment to an email, so you'll have some stuff to work with. All right, so here's the answer to this specific question. Is there a man in her future, a man of her dreams in her future? And the cards say yes, because there's 5 cards that are upright. The 9 of Cups, the Lovers or the Love card, the Healer card, and the 2 of Swords. So this cracks me up in a way, because the 2 of Swords really catches my attention, because what it says is that she remains indecisive. She remains blind to the situation because she's not fully committed. Yes, I'm going to do it. No, I'm going to not do it. But it still comes up as a yes. The 9 of Cups, that's a very interesting card, because that means that sometimes we can get into this emotional contentment or this emotional complacency, and that sort of says, she's sort of in that place. But, sometimes the way a relationship happens is you're not trying. Many people have told me that they found the person of their dreams and they just sort of gave up and said, the hell with it for a while. And that's when something happened. And I think that could be part of what this card is saying, is that she's, oh, well, I'm fine the way I'm at. Things are fine emotionally. I'm doing okay. But then the Lover's card. Well, I always point out with the Lover's card that the largest figure on the card is the angel. And what that says to me is that love is not something that's a matter of human will. It's a matter of divine will more than human will. We may try our best to find relationship, go out and look around and look and not find anything. But when it happens, when Spirit sends somebody our way, it's sort of like if you go to a party and, there's a bunch of people there and you walk around the room and, all of a sudden, you find yourself in a conversation with somebody and you go, wow, this person's really great. And that ends up being the person you end up in relationship with. And sometimes that's the way it happens. Love comes to us like a thief in the night. Isn't that the saying that is people say sometimes? But I think what the card is saying is that Spirit recognizes for this person that they are supposed to be in relationship, or that their growth, the next stage of their growth, will happen when they get back into relationship. Now, the trick will be the next card, the Judgment card. That's what this one says no. Well, why? Because she's not exercising judgment in this situation. She's sort of like just waiting for it to happen. But even that, I think, is very fascinating, because I think what it says here is the Spirit is saying, I'm going to send this your way, whether or not you're doing your part in this, because this is what needs to happen. This is what needs to happen in your life for you to evolve. We a lot of times we get issues that come our way. The Tower often is a big indication of something coming our way that we had no idea was going to happen, and it's devastating. But it's also something that is going to lead to the person actually evolving and actually growing. So here, she's not necessarily exercising judgment. So Spirit says, okay, I'm going to take charge. And so she's going to be given that opportunity. The question for her will be, will you do this differently than you've done in the past? Because I know a little history here that the person has not had particularly good luck in relationship, and I think some of that had to do with not necessarily accepting responsibility for what she could be responsible for in the relationship. Then the next card, the healer card, I think is an indication that whether or not she was consciously working at it, she has been going through some healing. She has been resolving some of the inner conflict. And even though she's not necessarily consciously doing the work, I think nonetheless some healing is happening. And you know how that happens sometimes with a client. Different experiences will come their way that are very transformative in the person's life. And they might not necessarily be consciously choosing it, but that's what they're doing. So, okay, so I want to give you guys a chance to ask questions or to give me your perspective on either part of the reading. So I'm going to be quiet here for a second and see who's got something to say.
I have something to say.
Oh, good.
So when you first pulled the cards and the Temperance card came up, and then just even looking at the Hermit, the Empress, the Queen of Cups reversed, and then the yes/no questions, what I see is a woman who, in relationship, there's a tendency to be codependent, and she gives a lot of energy. And she's not feeding herself. And she expects that relationship to feed her, and not literally feed her, but emotionally feed her instead of being in balance with her own emotions. And I totally agree with you that, you know, the Soul Essence card, and even the Page of Swords coming up, it's that she's going to repeat the cycle if she doesn't do her work. It's
Right.
going to be a man, the love of her life, who looks just like all the other loves of her life 2 years down the road, because she has to do her own work first.
Thank you. That's good confirmation for me. Well, anybody else? Vicki, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think she really wants somebody, but with that Hermit card reverse coming up almost right away, she's not doing her work. And yeah, I agree with Elizabeth.
So, you know, this brings up a really good point that we all have to think about when we're doing readings. And that is, you know, that people have this tendency to look at the tarot as if it's some sort of magic tool that's basically going to answer their problems and fix their difficulties or their questions.
Mm-hmm.
And how often, if not always, when you're doing a reading for somebody, do you have to make the shift from here's the answer that you're looking for to here's how you get to the answer that you're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, you know, encourage people to become proactive in the situation,
Mm-hmm.
and point out to them that the cards are revealing to them information. And you know this, if you've read for anybody, you sooner or later you get to this place where you realize that this is the case, and that is you're not telling them anything they haven't already thought about.
Mm-hmm.
The cards are almost always are indicating something that's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
When I do a reading and I, you know, talked for, 5 minutes or something, and I ask the person, does this make sense? And if they say, God, no, I have no idea why you're saying all this, well, it's likely that I'm not tuned into them, or it's likely that they don't want to hear what I have to say, or, in either case, the reading's probably not going to go too much further because they're not open. And that's something you have to look at and be willing to deal with. I know I've talked to Elizabeth about this a couple of times, And that is, you got to be willing to say, I'm not the right reader. Here's your money back. Or
Mhm.
say, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to be more helpful to you. If you're just doing it for fun or whatever, you're doing it, because you're practicing. Because usually, well, let me amend this a little bit. What I'll do is if I say that and they say, no, that doesn't make any sense to me, I'll look at the cards and I'll try to take a different tact, a different approach. Maybe my take on the card on that particular day, at that particular time is a little bit off. So I'll say, well, how else might I look at this card? So I'll try to spin it a different way. And sometimes that'll fix it. Sometimes then it'll start to make sense. But the one thing you don't want to do, particularly if you're reading professionally, is you don't want to let a client exhaust you.
Mhm.
The way that happens is you keep trying and you try and try and you don't get any sense of that you're getting anywhere. So you keep trying. You use up all of your reserves trying to make that reading work. And at the end of the reading, you still feel like you failed. You still feel like you're frustrated. It's better to recognize that fairly early so that you can, say no harm, no foul. I tell you, giving the money back to that person if they paid you is some of the best money you'll ever spend.
Mhm.
When I first started out working at the fairs back in the 90s, my God, I was so grateful that anybody would sit down at my table because I was just starting out. And I would start reading for them. And if I ran into one of those brick wall kind of people, I would just keep trying and trying and trying. And they'd get up, and at the end of the reading, I'd feel bad because they gave me money and I didn't give them anything. But my God, the next person that sat down, I could not make sense of the cards. I was psychically exhausted. So I was not able to help the next person because I let the person earlier exhaust me.
Mhm.
So it's a tricky razor edge path. But it's a really important thing you have to learn if you're going to read for other people. You have to learn it fairly quickly. Am I right, Elizabeth? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm. Richard?
Yeah.
I remember once when you read for me at a fair, and a reverse card came up, and you asked me, "What do you think this is?" And I said, I don't know. So you flipped it over and you said, "So this is what it could mean right side up. What do you think it means then upside down?" So I had to work on really listening to your words and formulate what that might look like in a different way. I haven't forgotten that lesson.
Oh, good. Well, sometimes I have to say I love to read, but I love to teach even more. Okay, questions. I was thinking this was going to take the whole session. We got to this pretty quickly. Well, what about the Celtic Cross? You guys have any issues or questions about the Celtic Cross?
I don't use the Celtic Cross.
Really? How come?
I don't when I think because I'm more an intuitive reader that when people ask me the questions, I just hear how many cards I'm supposed to pull and where they're supposed to fall, and then I do it like that. So I don't have any structure.
Okay. And you know what? That's fine because that works for you.
Yeah.
There's no only one way to do stuff. Like this is a big problem for a lot of basic students is they get into this thing of thinking that a card always means one thing and it doesn't mean anything else. And that's not right. I mean, I always have to try to, or I'm always trying to stay open to seeing a card in a completely new way. And you're just taking it one step further. You're just being open to working with the cards in a completely new way, letting the moment respond to you, letting the moment sort of be dynamic and letting the answer arise as you're doing the reading. So that's good. I mean, as long as it's working, that's really the bottom line. I just like to give you guys some tools to work with, but ultimately you have to, like any good artist, you learn the techniques, but then you take it in your own direction. You let your own inner guide, because ultimately, when I was talking yesterday to the beginners, the thing I said was that you can't go anywhere if you don't have trust in spirit. And what that means to me is that you don't have to be religious. You don't have to go along with any prescribed doctrine. But at the core of who you are, there has to be a level of trust between you and the universe. There has to be a sense of that if I ask the universe a question, that the universe is going to respond to me. And that's basically what we're doing when we're reading tarot cards. I think the tarot cards are just a way that spirit uses to talk to us. To me, it's not really that different than dreams, because dreams do the same kind of thing. You get information in a dream, and it doesn't, I do dream interpretation at those fairs too, and people will always say, oh, I've been looking for somebody who does this. And they'll say, but you're not going to be able to interpret my dream because my dreams don't make any sense at all. And that's when I go, oh boy, this is going to be a good one, because I know that there's something really substantial in those dreams. And invariably there is, but it's all symbolic. And most people don't know how to look at a dream in a symbolic way. What is the dream talking about? And then, of course, there's the other problem with dreams, which is, remembering your dream. Or the challenge with that is that people try to interpret the dream as they're waking up. And that's not what you need to do. The thing you need to do is just get the dream written down without any editing. And then you can come back to it later, and then you can start to pick it apart and start to make sense of it. Because that's what I do is, I'll write it down, and then I go over it and I think about, what that might mean symbolically. So, our relationship with spirit is really essential. Now, there's only 4 of us here now, so I'm going to say something I probably wouldn't say to a large group. But one of the things that I think you have to give up is your belief in the devil. Because the devil, as it's presented to us in our mythology, is like this malevolent energy that's going to trick us by, saying something. So if you're listening to voices in your head, how can you trust those voices if you don't know whether it's the voice of the good spirit or it's the voice of the dark spirit? Now, I'm not saying that there isn't evil in the world and there isn't something substantial about demons or devils, but I don't think it works quite that way. I don't think that it's a demon that's trying to trick you up. More often than not, it's your own ego trying to talk you out of something that it knows that if you do your work, you are going to change. And change is equivalent to death for the ego. And so it tries to stop us from growing and changing. But you got to press on anyway. But coming back to when you're doing the reading or you're working with your guidance, you got to trust that voice. I've had some really bizarre experiences where the voice said something to me that really I was like, you got to be kidding me. I can't say that. But I did, and it turned out to be right. So there really has to be a level of trust between you and spirit when you do this work. So, all right, guys, questions?
Well, I just want to say that I think the beauty of the cards is that, as you are open to spirit and open to the messages that come through, it's amazing how you can, I've been working with the cards for decades now, and it's amazing how you can do a reading and something can come up that you would have never seen before. I did a reading this week with a gentleman, and he asked me about somebody, and I said, oh, that person's in spirit. And he was like, no. And And my guides were saying, yeah, he is. He's in spirit. And the card was saying he was in spirit. And I was like, I said, he's not on this earth plane. And then my client, like, got all teary-eyed, and he's like, well, he is, but he has Alzheimer's. And the way the card presented, and the way spirit was so strong with me, like, this person is spirit. And so then I had to explain to the man who had come to me sort of because another client had referred him and he was a total disbeliever. I said, no, your father is traveling back and forth, that cord, and he's more out of his body than he is in his body. But when I finished that reading, I was so grateful. I was like, wow, that was the coolest lesson, for me, that people in spirit aren't always in spirit the way that, I think them to be. And so it was, and that's what I love about the cards, is that they teach you too. I mean, it's amazing. It was beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I commend you for your courage, because it's tough to take a stance like that. Let me tell you one of my versions of this. I went to a party. Some people invited me over to their house to read for like a group of women, like a coffee circle or whatever. And I'd read for a couple of them before, and I knew that. I knew them, and I was feeling pretty, like it was a pretty comfortable situation. And so when I got there, they said, well, would you like a glass of wine? Well, I thought, well, maybe a little bit of wine won't hurt. So I drank maybe half the glass or whatever, and then I started doing this reading. I got up and went in the room and started doing the readings. And the first lady that came to see me said to me, do you see a child in my future? So I laid out the cards and I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. I don't see that. And she goes, well, I'm pregnant. So what do you think? How do you think I felt at that point? Well, I'll tell you this. The first thing I thought was, I'm never drinking again if I'm ever going to be anywhere near a reading. I won't drink within 24 hours of when I'm due to do a reading. I just, I won't do anything that I think might in any way interfere with my gift. So that was the lesson for me. But I sort of stumbled through the reading and, felt terrible. I felt that was a bad reflection on me. Well, I ran into the woman who hosted the party about 9 months later, and she said, you know that reading you did for that friend of mine? I said, yeah. And she said she lost the baby. Had a miscarriage. So you got, it's tricky. Sometimes you get, you get information, but you got to figure out how to handle that diplomatically. How to be just, like Elizabeth was just saying, this was difficult. And you really have to have a sense of where your client is at. I think one of the most important skills you develop is getting a sense of where the person is. If you're going to read it at fairs or whatever, sooner or later you're going to get one of those hostile to psychic people. And you got to be able to read that within 3 minutes. Otherwise, you're going to end up just exhausted, because they'll just put you through the ringer, and you at the end of the day is of no use to them or to yourself. And then the next people suffer because you let that person use you up. There was something else I wanted to share about this. I can't think of what it was. It's really important to take care of yourself. It's really important to take care of the client. Oh, so the other thing I was going to talk about is that every once in a while, you're going to have people that are going to sit down and they're going to say, well, does a death card mean that somebody's literally going to die? Well, I've done thousands of readings. Only 3 times has it ever been literal. And each of those times, it was vivid. It wasn't it wasn't just I was sort of shooting in the dark. I definitely had a sense of it being real. In fact, the first one was probably the most interesting story. Was I was reading at the Boulder Creek Festival, and a lady sat down and said, "Is this a real thing?" And I said, "Well, I certainly think it is. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to be of service." And she said, "Well, I have a really serious question I want to ask." And she said, "I want to ask unless I know you're going to be real with me." And I said, "All right, I'll do the best I can. If I can't answer it, I'll just tell you, and I'll give you your money back, and you can be on your way." So she said, "All right." So she said, "I want to know if my father's going to die in the next 6 months." Well, boy, that's not an easy question to field. So what I did was I said, "All right." So I looked at the cards, and the card said yes. And so I said, "Look, I don't feel that the future is carved in stone. I think we have free will. But the cards are indicating things are moving in that direction. So it's best to get his affairs in order, get your affairs in order." I said, "You need to say whatever it is you need to say. You don't want to leave anything unsaid." And so she came back the next year to the Boulder Creek Festival and came to see me again. And she said, "I want to really thank you for that reading you did for me last year." And then she told me who she was, and I remembered. And she said, "You're right. He died within 6 months." And I was really grateful that you answered that because it helped me to prepare. Now, I think part of the reason that that was true and I was able to do that was because of the fact that she was in a place where she wanted a really serious answer. She wasn't playing a game. Every once in a while, you get clients that you can't read for because they're not open. And I'll lay out the cards, I'll look at the cards, and the cards are saying, "We're not talking. We're not talking." And I'm like, okay, what's up with that? And it's, what it turns out is that the person's really not open. They're playing a game, or they're doing the let's disprove the psychic game, that sort of thing. And that's one of those things you have to work at figuring out so that you don't put yourself in a difficult situation. And if maybe next time I'll be prepared to go a little bit longer if we want to, or we can maybe do an extra session. But thanks for being here tonight, folks.
Thank you. So nice to see you.
Enjoyed it.
Good to see you too. Say hi to Uday for me, will you?
I will. Take care.
Take care. Vicki, we'll see you next time.
Okay, I'll be here. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.